what I don't like. I don't like mosquitoes. I don't like her temperament.
Money, I don't like to spend money.
I don't like the expression "you can't do worse" because, frankly, they can't do worse.
Right now, I don't like mosquitoes too much. I don't like critics. I don't even like using the H word, you know, the place that's down there.
I don't like Assad at all. I don't like people leaving a speech early, crying. I don't like when I see people burning our flag.
I don't like the way that looks. Look, I don't like tweeting. I don't like talking about how I feel about people. I don't like the word adjustment.
I don't like that. You don't like that.
I don't like losing. I don't like losing. And I don't like those. I don't like Pinocchios.
Pinocchios added to the list of things President Trump doesn't like. The last one came yesterday after he again claimed he signed more bills than any other president. Take a look.
What we've done over a short period of time and what we're going to be doing over the next 6 months will be incredible. We've signed more bills, and I'm talking about through the legislature, than any president ever. For a while, Harry Truman had us. And now I think we have everybody, Mike. I better say think, otherwise they'll give me a Pinocchio. And I don't like those. I don't like Pinocchios.
All right, he may not like Pinocchios, but according to the New York Times, Trump's pace is behind the last 6 presidents, who on average signed 43 bills in their first 6 months in office. In fact, both Roosevelt and Truman signed more bills within their first 100 days than Trump did in nearly twice that time. They also note that nearly half the bills Trump has signed into law are ceremonial or routine, such as renaming a federal courthouse. Typically, those kinds of bills are not included when tallying legislative achievements, of which he has had, let's see if we can get that number for you. Joining us now, the Washington Post White House Bureau Chief Philip Rucker and reporter for the New York Times, Yamiche Alcindor. Yamiche, I'll start with you. How many legislative accomplishments has the president had? And after the big health care fail, where do we go legislatively from here?
Well, I'll start with the second question, which is that where we go from here is really another big fight, which is the budget. The House Budget Committee just unveiled a blueprint, and they're now Republicans are now going to have to deal with how they're going to pass this bill, and also deal with some of the same problems that happened with health care, which is how do you appease conservatives who are concerned about spending too much money, and then how do you deal with moderates who are concerned about the cuts to social safety net issues. In terms of legislative achievements, it's really hard to say what he's actually done, because a lot of the things that he's touting as successes are not things that are actually going to change the lives of the people that put him in office. And then when I mean that, I mean by changing healthcare, changing jobs, making something big. I think obviously he pulled out of the Paris Accords, but that's something that's not going to happen down the line. So maybe Phil can help us out and say what maybe the White House is saying about what specifically they've done legislatively.
Well, Philip Rucker, let's talk about where we're going in the future. Obviously, Mitch McConnell's now saying we're just going to do a straight-out vote to repeal Obamacare. That may be just as difficult as what they've been trying to do over the past 6 months. What are you hearing from the White House? What are you hearing on the Hill? What is the next step to kickstart this agenda?
Yeah, well, I think that step's going to be difficult. It seems like McConnell wants to call that vote to really pressure these senators to basically come forward and say whether they want the full repeal or not. The White House aides I talked to say, look, you know, there are enough votes if you look at all the Republican senators who had voted in the past for a repeal bill, but it had never been sort of something that they knew would become law. So it's a different dynamic here. But generally speaking, the president was blindsided by this news last night. Just yesterday, he was touting this big health care bill would be passed. He even turned around to look at Vice President Pence at that event for some reassurance, and of course a few hours later the whole thing was killed. And back to his legislative achievements, there's one that the White House would point to, and I think it's fair, and it's the Supreme Court confirmation of Justice Neil Gorsuch in the Senate. They consider that a legislative achievement from the first 100 days.
Mish, what do you think Mitch McConnell thinks of the current state of affairs? Is he unhappy? Does he care that health care doesn't appear to be moving forward?
I think he's very unhappy. I think that he is very unhappy mainly because the president is now looking at this as loyalty and looking at this in terms of who can he trust in the Senate. The White House is already looking at people to primary Senator Jeff Flake. So the idea is that the White House is trying to use a carrot. You're trying to use a stick rather than a carrot to force senators to do things. And I think Mitch McConnell is now put in a place where he's having to be in the middle of senators who are very wary of President Trump, who really don't trust him, who also don't think that he has much political capital to force them to do anything, and a president who now is very frustrated and is looking at people thinking that they're the reason why he's not going to have this big legislative achievement. And then, of course, Mitch McConnell is looking down the line and thinking, how are they going to pass tax reform if they already are having all these problems with health care? He's looking down the line and realizing that he's going to have to try to get a lot of stuff done, and he has there's really little trust there to actually get people to work together in a way that's really meaningful.
Well, this might seem like an odd question to you, but it's occurred to me several times recently because of the lack of press briefings, no press briefings. But do we really know what the President of the United States does all day, every day?
That's a great question, and the answer is no. Last week there were 3 straight days where he really had nothing on his public schedule save for a meeting here or there. He did not appear in public. This was before he left for Paris, and it was unclear to me, frankly, how many hours of that day he was actually spending in the Oval Office conducting work. He had just returned from Germany. He might have been exhausted and getting some sleep or something like that. But the answer is no. We just don't have a complete picture of how he occupies his time.
All right, Philip Rucker and Yamiche Alcindor, thank you both. And as we wrap up this edition of Morning Joe, final thoughts today.
Well, I want to go back to something that Philip said and earlier something that Josh Green said. Inside Washington, in New York, we're looking at health care reform. We're looking at Russia. We're looking at all of these other issues. But Philip Rucker just underlined something that matters to the conservative base more than anything else. That is the Supreme Court. And they will look at the first 6 months and say, we got a conservative Supreme Court justice. Check. We'll take that over everything else that you can give us. And then the Steve Bannon populist wing of the party, they're looking at immigration and illegal immigration and what's Donald Trump doing to stem the flow of illegal immigration. And they're hearing stories that he actually is, in some ways, really stemming that tide. So you take those 2 achievements in and of themselves, they look at that and they think, not a bad start, while the rest of us look at this presidency and wonder how it can get much worse.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does it for us this morning. Stephanie Ruhle picks up the coverage right now.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.